What's up, everyone? Good morning. Hope you guys are doing well. Today is Monday, May the 18th. Overall markets, as you can see, last week, fairly neutral close. We'll kind of talk about that a little bit more in depth. Friday, along with Thursday of last week, a little bit of a pullback here on the major indices, couple pullbacks on some tech names as well, which of course we'll touch up on this week. The main thing is going to be Nvidia earnings. We have a couple other big news events coming up as well. We have FOMC minutes coming up this week. SpaceX IPO is going to be one of another major news events to keep an eye out for here in the near future. But yeah, what's up, everyone? Hope you guys are doing well. Hope you guys had a great weekend. What's up, Calvin, Victor? What's up, Maria, B Roots, Lamit? Good morning, Night, and good morning, Vate, Andy, Josh. What's up, everyone? Kevin, Gerald. What's up, Robert? SpaceX IPO. I think they're trying to target earlier in June, sometime in June. What's up, everyone? Cosmic, Z Norse, Maria, Nina, Function. What's up, everyone? Yeah, good morning. Hope you guys are doing well. Let me pull up the economic calendar and we will get started here. Okay. Let's first talk about the economic calendar for this week. Really, things to keep an eye out for. It's just going to be the FOMC minutes here on Wednesday. A lot of orange folder news events, but the main thing is going to be the FOMC minutes. That's at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then some other ones to keep an eye out for: unemployment. That's going to be at 8:30 on Thursday, 9:45 flash services PMI. And then, of course, on Friday, we do have the revised consumer sentiment. That's going to be at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So not too much for the economic calendar this week. Only thing, as I mentioned, is to keep an eye out on the FOMC minutes. As for the earnings calendar, let's go on to some of the major and notable earnings for this week. As you can see right here, the main thing to keep an eye out for is, of course, going to be Nvidia earnings. That is Wednesday after close. As for some other ones to keep an eye out for, Home Depot, right? You have VRT. There's some other bigger ones, but the main thing is going to be Nvidia Wednesday after close. And yeah, that's about it, at least for the earnings calendar. If you do see any, of course, Walmart actually on Thursday before open. Maybe Bull if you're interested. You have Zoom. You have a couple other ones, but the main thing, of course, is Nvidia. That should shape up the market fairly nicely. All right. With that being said, let's go on to some major indices, and then of course we'll go on to the tech names here in a second. There's a lot of things to kind of go over this week, of course, with the markets pulling back here. There's a lot of nice opportunities potentially setting back up for the upside after having this nice rally. So we'll talk about this here, starting off with, of course, the NQ. Let me grab some water here before we get started. Alrighty, let's start off here on the weekly time frame. So starting off with the weekly time frame on the QQQ, you can see, of course, we are above our previous all-time highs level, so we're still fairly bullish. If you're looking at the last week's candle close, so fairly neutral candle close. Of course, after having about 6 weeks up in a row, you can see last week's weekly candle close fairly neutral after having a nice rally towards the upside. So just a little bit of an indication. This one candle in itself doesn't really mean too much based off of the location and where we're at. Right, higher time frame, still very much bullish here on the weekly, as you can see. As long as we really maintain above, right, 640, right, that's kind of your weekly higher low. Of course, you don't really want to see markets pull back all the way down in towards that 640. But as long as you can maintain above that level, right, we're going to be building up higher lows here on the weekly time frame. Let's go into the daily chart here. As you can see, last week, a little bit of a pullback on Thursday and Friday. As you can see here for the Qs, higher lows still very much well being built. Very bullish here on the QQQ. So the daily chart building up higher lows. We could see even a pullback down in towards earlier of last week's lows and still be bullish towards upside and make a little bit of a double bottom. We could even come all the way back down in towards 690 or even 685. Right? If we're looking at this here on the higher time frames, right, our higher low is our 700. That's going to be key, at least for the Qs, based off of the weekly time frame that we have set. So as long as we can maintain above our 700 key level, which happens to be our last week's lows, we're going to maintain a bullish bias here in the market. So key levels that we have marked out. Coming into this week, we have a couple key levels marked out. We have our 706, at least for today, and we have our 710. So for the Qs coming into market open here, you can see Friday, we end up having a gap down in the markets, came back up in towards our previous day highs, rejected into close, and then we end up having a nice push lower. If we're actually looking at the futures, we had a little bit of a bigger move on the futures charts all the way down in towards that 28,900. But if we're looking at the NQ along with the Qs coming to market open, we are about to open up in between its range from Friday. The levels we're going to have marked out today coming into market open is going to be that 710 along with that 706. On Thursday and Friday, or specifically on Friday, this was the first day that we had a bias to both sides. Normally, we're just looking for dips for continuation higher. Friday was the only day where, okay, now since we're having a pretty big gap down, we're well underneath that previous day lows, we can be looking to play both sides here in the markets. Short side was a little bit more difficult. You had that fade later into the day, but there's a couple names where you could have been looking for some downside, but based off the location, right, on the weekly and the daily chart, we'd still much rather look for, right, continuation longs and dips back towards the upside. So at least for the levels coming to today in the game plan on the Qs, what we're going to be looking for, if we do want to see some upside above our 710 for a push back up in towards our previous day highs. Another possible scenario is now going to be the bounce play here off our previous day lows for this pushback towards the upside. What I would like to see here, as I mentioned in the markets, is the daily chart hold above key levels. And we're just going to be looking for really now the break back above our previous day highs, right? Longs, of course, the best case scenario is going to be above our previous day highs. But just based off where we're at currently, right, where it's very unlikely that the markets are going to have a big push within the first 10 to 15 minutes. And then we could be looking for that previous day high retest. So longs, as I mentioned, best above our previous day highs, of course. As for short side, I'll be a little bit more cautious on shorts unless we're underneath that previous day lows and we showed a little bit more weakness. Then we can be looking to take price down in towards that 700. But until we can break underneath that previous day lows, I would be a little bit more cautious, as I mentioned, on the short side here for the markets. If we go on to the NQ chart, let's just talk about this a little bit as well. Weekly time frame, fairly similar thing. As you can see right here, this is the first weekly candle here, indicating that the momentum has just slowed down very slightly, right? You can see every single week we had a strong candle close. Last week we had a little bit of a neutral candle close. As I mentioned, just based off the location, that weekly candle close isn't giving us the best information, right? Because this next weekly candle can very much well be back at our all-time highs level, right? As long as you can maintain above our last week's lows. So for the daily chart, higher lows are still very much well being built. Now what I'd like to see is really this higher low. As you can see, if we're looking at this based off of the daily chart, every single higher low has been bought up. Now what I like to see is as long as you can maintain above our 28,800, we're going to be looking for a pushback up and towards our all-time highs. If we closed underneath, then we can see a little bit of a bigger pullback down in towards our key levels here on the higher time frames. But as long as we build this higher low here on the daily, we're still going to be very much well bullish here in the markets. As for some of the levels that I have marked out, you can see NQ came back, held key levels, which was that 28,900, at least for today. The key levels that I personally have marked out is our 29,250. Other levels that we can have marked out here as well is our previous day lows, which is going to be this 29,100. So coming into market open here for the NQ, what we would like to see is the rally back towards the upside, right? As long as we can maintain above key levels, if we can hold above our previous day lows here as well, potential room back up in towards our previous day highs. What I would like to see is this kind of lower time frame potential cup and handle, or sorry, inverse head and shoulders here. If we can maintain above that previous day lows, we can see this push back towards the upside. If we're still looking for some downside, it's only in play underneath our 29,100, which would be down in towards our pre-market lows. And that's only in play underneath our previous day lows, which is that 21,900 as I mentioned. So this is what we have for the NQ coming to market open. If we look at the SPY, along with the ES, as you can see, the SPY ended up closing green. So a little bit of an upper wick indicating that some sellers are stepping in, but based off the location, as we talked about, as you can see right here, up 6 weeks in a row. This is the first sign of a little bit of momentum slowing down. But as you can see, higher time frames, very much well still bullish above our previous all-time highs level. If we look at this on the daily chart, this just looks like a very small pullback in the markets for a pushback up in towards our all-time highs here, of course. If you look at the SPY chart on the hourly, the key levels that we have coming into market open have our previous day highs, which was a key level 744. Nice little rejection here on Friday. And then other levels that we have marked out is our 736 along with our 740. So coming into market open here, if we do want to see some upside, maintain above our 737 for a pushback towards the upside. Another possible scenario here is above our 740 for a push up in towards that 744 here on the higher time frames. So these are the scenarios that I have for upside coming into market open. If we get underneath that 736, hold underneath that 736 coming into market open, then we can see a little bit of a bigger push down in towards our pre-market lows and potentially that 733 on the higher time frames. So the higher time frames is leaning more bullish. So I'd much rather wait for any sort of bullish price action for continuation. But as I mentioned, if we're looking for intraday price action, we can be open to playing both sides. If we're looking at the ES, similar thing here, well above our previous all-time highs key levels. If we look at this daily chart, this is the first, right, I'd say bigger daily candle close underneath our previous candle low. You can see we've had it a couple times here where we've broken underneath our previous candle low, and we've had a strong, somewhat of a strong candle close towards the downside, where we had one here, and then now this is our first sign of momentum slowing down here on the higher time frames if we're looking at the bar by bar count once again. So as you can see right here, if I'm looking at the daily chart, wait, the break underneath, we can see a pushback down in towards now key levels of support. We very much well could see that rally back up in towards our all-time highs. Very possible scenario here on the overall markets. If we have a little bit of a bigger pullback down in towards, right, our last week's lows, we can see continuation back towards the upside. We can see even a bigger pullback and it'd still be very much bullish. So regardless of the overall markets and how much it drops, right, as long as we maintain above a higher low here on the daily, and the daily has a long ways to go for that higher low to be invalidated, right? We'd like to see, honestly, this hold for that pushback towards the upside, that first pullback long, but it could even come back down in towards our 7,200 and still create a higher low here on the higher time frames. It could even have that previous all-time highs retest, which would be that double potential double bottom for a pushback towards the upside here as well. So if we're looking at the ES and SPY, right, the higher time frames is still very much bullish. On the lower time frames, we're just going to be waiting for the flip back towards the upside. So for the ES, the key levels that I have marked out is going to be our 74.20. If we're looking at the key levels, at least coming to market open, above this level, pushback towards the upside is in play. Underneath our previous day lows, we can see a little bit of a bigger pullback today down in towards our pre-market lows, along with our after hours lows. So this is the game plan that I have on the SPY and Qs, at least coming to market open. The higher time frames, as I mentioned, is still bullish. At least on the lower time frames, I'm going to be a lot more neutral and patient for a clear direction on the lower time frames on the SPY and the Qs, at least coming into today until the markets can break back above key levels. Then we're going to be a little bit more neutral and open to playing both sides on the day trades. As for the other charts that we do have, if you guys do have any tickers or any charts, you guys can now drop them in the chat now. If you guys are enjoying this so far, I appreciate if you guys drop a like. If you guys haven't joined the free daily watch list, that of course is in the description below as well. All right, let's start off on the SMH. Quickly go over the semiconductor ETF, and then we will head on to some tech names here in a second. So if we look at the SMH, as you can see right here, well above our previous all-time highs. This is not really that valid anymore, but you can see huge rally towards our all-time highs. And now you can see this is a first sign of a red candle here on the weekly time frame on the SMH. You can see last week's candle closing bearish, but as you can see right here, this is not that bearish, right? One candle doesn't determine the structure here on the weekly time frame, right? We're gonna need a huge weekly candle close or a huge invalidation if we want to see a bigger pullback on the semiconductors or the overall markets, if we want to see more bearish price action, right? Just this one candle, as I mentioned, doesn't mean anything. The next weekly candle can all be right back at our all-time highs. So as you can see, SMH, a little bit of pullback on Thursday and Friday. If we're looking at this on the daily count, higher lows are still very much well being built on the daily chart. For the SMH, break back above, continuation all the way back up and towards our all-time highs is in play. If we show a little bit more weaker price action coming to this week, we can potentially make a double bottom off our last week's lows and continue all the way back up and towards our all-time highs. Let's look at the key levels coming to this week on the SMH. Levels that I have marked out is going to be that previous day highs. Other levels now I'm going to mark out here as well is going to be that previous day lows, which is our 554. So for the SMH coming to market open, we're going to keep an eye out on our previous day low bounce for a push back up in towards our previous day highs. Or now if we can get back above our previous day highs, push back up in towards our all-time highs here is in play. Only way I'm interested in some shorts on the semiconductors, if we can get a little bit more weaker price action here underneath that 554, we can see a bigger push down in towards our last week's lows, which would be our 543. The semiconductors were a little bit weaker compared to the overall indices last week. So some of the memory names were pulling back. Intel's pulling back, MU, SNDK, a little bit of a pullback. The SPY was the strongest indice out of all the other major indices. So that's kind of an indication the market's slowing down just a little bit. But in this case scenario, we're just consolidating. So a lot of the setups that I'll show you guys are just pulling back into key areas, and we can look to take them back towards the upside. So at least for the SMH, as I mentioned, back above our previous day highs, all-time highs is in play. If we break underneath, this short is in play down in towards our 544. You have to be a little bit more cautious of this short, but this still is valid if you can get a strong break underneath that previous day lows. If we look at the IWM here, this one, of course, on the weekly time frame, a little bit more of a bearish weekly candle. So if the SMH or if the SPY and Qs had a little bit more of a bearish weekly candle close, which would be underneath that previous week's lows, then I would be like, okay, we're a little bit more bearish here on the market. Something like the IWM, where we're closing close to that weekly low that we created 2 weeks ago, right around that 276. Right, this one looks less bullish compared to something like the Qs, which is ultimately very bullish and closed close to its high that we created 2 weeks ago compared to something like the IWM. So for the IWM, this one, if we look at the daily chart, Key levels that we have marked out is going to be that 272. Other levels that we have marked out is that 280. So I would like to see IWM back above 280 for a push towards the all-time highs. If you have a little bit more of a bigger pullback, we're going to have to look for some sort of buyers to step in here off that 272 previous all-time highs key level. All right, with that being said, let me go on to some tech names that we have coming into this week. Starting off with Tesla, and we're going to make our way down. If you guys do have any other tickers, as I mentioned, you guys can now drop them in the chat or any charts you'd like me to go over. If you guys are enjoying this so far, I appreciate if you guys drop a like. If you guys haven't joined the free daily watch list, that of course is in the description below as well. All right. Let's start off on Tesla here on the weekly. So Tesla on the weekly time frame ended up pushing up in towards our 450 last week. And as you can see, a little bit of sellers kind of stepping in on Thursday and Friday. If we're looking at this weekly candle close, a little bit more bearish here. As you can see, pretty big upper wick closed kind of back in between its range that we had. If we're even looking at the overall trend here on the weekly, I'd say we're a little bit more neutral than anything on Tesla. Rejected off our all-time highs coming into 2026, and then of course this one is lagging behind. We do have a SpaceX IPO coming up here as well, so we'll see how that kind of affects the market. We know kind of earlier into the year we end up having a little bit of a sell-off coming into that first initial reaction with the SpaceX IPO. But at least for Tesla, you can see kind of closing back in between its week's range prior, now back underneath this 430. If we look onto the daily chart here now as well, you can see the daily chart in the past 20-40 sessions. This is still fairly bullish here on the daily. So the weekly time frame fairly neutral. If we look at the daily chart, we end up having a little bit of seller step in here off that 450. Now what we like to see is this previous high be turned into support. So you can see we have a touch here, touch here. This is the level that we broke out from. Now we really like to see Tesla hold that 410, 420 general area for a pushback towards the upside. I personally would like to see that hold of that 410. Could we close underneath that 410, overshoot, and then reclaim pushback towards the upside? Yes, we can. But as I mentioned, the higher lows now I'd like to see be set off that 410 general area. So this is going to be that higher low that I'd like to be set. That's going to be the key level on Tesla moving forward, at least for the levels that I have set on the lower time frames. We're kind of just right at that key level. So right here is our previous high. We have our 415, and then we have that 400 on Tesla. So coming to market open, the levels that I have marked out today, let's mark out that previous day lows here as well. So we have a couple key levels. We have our previous day lows, 420. We have our 430, and then we have our pre-market lows. If we want to see some continued downside, pop and fade here off that previous day lows, continuation down in towards that pre-market lows. Of course, underneath that pre-market lows, we can see a little bit more downside, which would be that 410. Longs for me on Tesla, I personally only like that previous day low reclaim. If we can get that reclaim back above that 422, then we could be looking for this trade back up in towards that 430 here on Tesla. If I'm looking at this on the hourly, as I mentioned, a little bit more neutral than anything here now. We are back into key levels. This is where we end up having that first initial bounce. So let's see if any sort of buyers can step in here on Tesla for a potential move back towards the upside. But if we still stay heavy now underneath that previous low, we very much well could use this level as a rejection, or if we get underneath, we can see a little bit of a bigger pullback down in towards that 400 here on the higher time frame. So fairly neutral on Tesla coming to market open. We are showing a little bit more weakness, and we're underneath our previous day lows. So currently leaning slightly bearish, but if we can reclaim, we can see a push right back towards the upside. Let's talk about a couple names that I really like here on the higher time frame, starting off with Nvidia. So as you can see right here above our previous all-time highs, of course, Nvidia's weekly candle closed fairly bullish. As you can see, end up having a strong candle close finally back above our previous all-time highs. A little bit of a pullback coming into last week's close, but fairly bullish here on the weekly time frame. If we're looking at this on the daily chart here as well, I am very much bullish here on Nvidia. Nice break and retest, hold above that 200, nice continuation higher. Now the daily higher low is going to be set on Nvidia above our 215. This is our first pullback here. We can see that continuation towards our upside, or if we pull back down in towards that 215, as long as we can maintain above this, we're going to maintain a bullish bias here on Nvidia. So Nvidia is one of my favorite names for continuation higher. This is one of the only semis that I wouldn't say this one has a nice rally back up and towards our all-time highs here. Of course, we're now at key levels. We finally broken out now compared to all the other semiconductors. So what I'd like to see on Nvidia is continuation moving forward. So at least for the hourly time frame, what we like to see is the hold above now the previous day lows for continuation towards the levels. So for Nvidia, above our previous day highs, continuation back up and towards our all-time highs, potential previous day low bounce here as well, offer 224 for a push up in towards that 236 and above. So for Nvidia, I'm very much bullish here on the higher time frames. It does have earnings coming into this week, so a lot more day trades unless you're well positioned from a few weeks ago. You're going to be a little bit more cautious if you're going to hold into earnings. But if we're talking about the lower time frames, right above our previous day highs today, we can see a potential move back up in towards our all-time highs. So 230 along with our 224 is going to be key coming into market open. Let's go into AMD. If we're looking at this here on the weekly time frame, so AMD really solid break above our consolidation. Nice rally towards the upside. You can see last week's weekly candle, a little bit of sellers stepping in. As I mentioned, just 1 week's worth, one candle is not going to be a big picture, right? It can't really give you too much information. But if you're looking at the higher time frames and the past weeks after breaking outside of its consolidation, look how bullish AMD is. So very bullish here. If we're talking about the weekly candle, a little bit of sellers stepping in last week. If we're looking at the daily chart, coming into this week, we have a couple key levels. The main thing moving forward for AMD is going to be our gap fill. So as you can see right here, our gap fill is going to be key. As long as you maintain above that gap fill, that's going to be that higher low here set on the daily time frame. So as long as you can maintain above that gap, we can see that continuation back up and towards our all-time highs. Of course, if we break inside the gap, then we can see a reversal here in the markets. As for the key levels today, and what we have marked out, we have our 430, and we also have that gap fill here on the higher time frames. We can even adjust this down in towards that 430 for the touch here from that earnings high. I think I actually like this a little bit better here on AMD. But what I would like to see now is the reclaim back above 430, continuation back towards the previous day highs and above. If we stay a little bit heavy, is this a short that's valid here on AMD? We could see a potential kind of short scenario setup. If we can stay heavy underneath that previous day lows, we can be looking to target this low from 400. If let's say the markets do want to show a little bit more weakness, right? This is kind of the trade scenario that you'd be looking for. But if we're looking for upside at least, right, let's say we come all the way back down, right, reclaim back above, we can be looking for this trade back towards upside, risking underneath that 430. So for AMD, right, key levels coming into today at least, keep an eye on that 430 previous day lows here as well. Apple key levels here on the higher time frames. Apple is one of the most bullish tickers. If we're looking at this one, kind of consolidation, recently had earnings, now breaking above our all-time highs here as well. Apple has a lot more room towards the upside. So as you can see, past weekly candles, nice pushes higher. If we're looking at its last week candle, pretty strong candle close here on Apple towards the upside. If we're looking at this on the daily chart, no signs of momentum slowing down here as well. If we're looking at the daily higher low, I would like to see, at least for Apple, we can see a pullback all the way down in towards that kind of 288, and we'd still be bullish here on the higher time frames on Apple. That's also our previous all-time high. So for Apple, we're going to maintain a bullish bias as long as we're above that 288. If we're looking at the lower time frames here, as for Apple, in between its previous day's range, key levels that we're going to have marked out is going to be that 300 key psych. If you do want to see some upside coming to this week, above or 300, push up in towards that 303 here is in play. So that's what we have on Apple coming to market open. As for a few other tickers, if we're looking at Google, a little bit of consolidation the past 2 weeks. So I'd like to see Google now push back up in towards our all-time highs here and above. So for Google, daily chart, very much bullish, right? Higher lows are being built. Similar thing to AMD. Let's see if we can kind of build a higher low. It would be nice if we can build a higher low before that earnings gap. If it came down in towards that earnings gap, it would be you want to be a little bit more patient. But something like Google, after that earnings gap up, you can see higher lows are very much well being built. Now we're kind of forming this flag pattern here on the lower time frames. So for Google, let's keep an eye out on the break back above our previous day highs. We also have this kind of mini cup and handle forming here as well. If we can break back now above our previous day highs, that's going to be our trigger for continuation back up in towards our all-time highs and above here on Google. So let's keep an eye out on that previous day low bounce, or now the trade back above our previous day highs for continuation. Microsoft, we had some news on Friday, really one of the only green tickers compared to the rest of the markets. As for Microsoft, we end up having a nice weekly candle close, at least for the past couple of weeks, a lot more consolidation, right? Kind of building this higher low, or trying to build this higher low on the weekly time frame. If we're looking at this on the daily chart, nice kind of higher lows are being built off those April lows as well. Now what we like to see for Microsoft, the break back above our previous all-time highs, our previous pivot high, which is that 430, for that continuation back towards the upside, as you can see. But for Microsoft, a lot more patient on this one, not really too many day trading setups. What I would like to see now is the break back above our previous day highs, along with this 432. If we can get that break back above, then we can see a push back up in towards our earnings high, which is that 444. Meta consolidation, not really too much to talk about on this one. If you're looking at this on the daily chart, a lot more consolidation, just draw out this range. As for Amazon, this one now, if we're looking at the weekly time frame, what I'd actually like to see here on Amazon is the potential previous all-time highs retest here off that 260. So as you can see right here, really solid push towards the highs. Now we're having our first bearish or first red weekly candle. If we can get that pullback down in towards that previous all-time highs, buyers step in, right, push back up in towards our all-time highs here is in play. So Amazon looks good as long as you can maintain above that 260 here, continuation towards our all-time highs. If we're looking at the weekly time for, if we're looking at the daily chart, as I mentioned, the retest here off that 260, that's where I'd like to see buyers step in for continuation higher. If we're on the lower time frames, really not too much to talk about. Key levels today, what we can have marked out, we can actually just refine some of the levels, is going to be that previous day lows, and we end up having that previous day highs marked out. So for Amazon, above our previous day highs, potential continuation back up in towards our gap fill. If we reject, then we're just going to come right back down in towards that previous day lows. And then for Netflix, this one kind of just consolidating here. Not really too much to talk about on this name. All right, with that being said, I'm going to go on to a couple more tickers. We don't have too much time, so just going to kind of speed run through a couple tickers here. Starting off with some memory names. MU, as you can see, if we're looking at this on the weekly time frame, a little bit of a pullback. If we're looking at this, right, sellers stepping in on Thursday and Friday, still very much bullish here on the weekly. Daily chart here, higher lows, I'd like to see maintain above our 700. Maintain above that 700, higher low here on the daily for continuation higher. If we break underneath our 700, then I'm going to be a little bit more patient. But this is, as you can see, the higher low. Buyers are trying to step in here in the pre-market. For a lot of these names today, I do like these for a potential break and retest above our previous day highs, continuation back towards the upside is in play. So for something like MU, this setup looks super solid in my opinion. If we can get that break and retest above our previous day highs hold, we can see this move all the way back towards the upside, right? Higher lows are being built on the daily, higher lows being maintained on the hourly time frame. Break back above our previous day highs, we have room back up in towards that 780. SNDK, Previous day high, similar setup here as well. I like the MU setup a little bit better. Same thing on Intel. I like this one here as well. This is our first pullback here on the daily. As you can see, key levels that we have marked out. If we're looking at some of the EMAs that we have marked out here as well on Intel, still very much well above key levels. Now we're just kind of pulling back here on the daily time frame. If we're looking at the weekly chart, a little bit of seller, so pretty big weekly candle here on Intel. But if we're looking at the overall structure of the markets, higher lows, still very much well being built. If we look at the daily chart from April lows, very much bullish here. So for Intel, what I would like to see is if we can start finding some sort of bottom on Intel, break back above our previous day highs, we can see that push back up and towards that all-time highs. So for Intel, keep an eye out on some of the key levels that we have marked out. Main levels that we have marked out is our previous day highs, which let me just actually refine it here today. And then we also have our previous day lows. So Intel, previous day highs marked out, and then we can also market that previous day lows. If we can break above retest continuation, we can see a move all the way back up in towards our 116 here on the higher time frame. So that's what we have for Intel. If we kind of reject, then we're going to be a little bit more patient. But longs above and hold above, we can see that push higher. So that's what we're going to be looking for on Intel coming to market open here. As for some other tickers, let's quickly go over these ones. AVGO, nice kind of base, hit our all-time highs, a little bit of reaction here. We just like to see now the close above our 430. So if we're looking at AVGO, something like this, higher time frames very much bullish, right? Higher lows are being set as long as you can maintain above 400, continuation towards the upside. Oracle trying to find a low here now as well. Higher lows are being built back above our 200 key psych for pushback towards the upside. Palantir really just consolidating, not too much to talk about on this one. A couple names that I'm not sure too many names that made a brand new all-time highs as of last week or end up having a super strong close on the weekly. NBIS was one of those. Previous all-time highs hold for continuation. NBIS continuation now in play above our 216. So keep an eye out on NBIS today. Maintain above 216 or above our previous day highs. Continuation back up in towards that all-time high. So NBIS continues to show strength here. Yeah, let's see what else. Let me go on a couple other names. We can go into the memory ETF here. If we're looking at this one, or MRAM. I thought you were talking about DRAM, but this one looks good, right? Basing here on the higher time frames. After this nice pop that we had 2 weeks ago, now we just like to see the hold and kind of this higher time frame daily flag form. So if we're looking at this one, a good reference point is going to be that 9 EMA, as long as you can maintain above our 335. But currently, I'd like to see that break back above our previous day highs for a pushback towards the upside. DRAM, something we can keep an eye out for. If we're looking at the memory ETF, you can see some of the memories are starting to find a bottom. Higher lows are very much well being built, kind of forming this higher time frame wedge pattern on the daily chart. We're going to kind of draw this out on DRAM. If we can just kind of consolidate a little bit more, break continuation back up and towards the all-time high. So as I mentioned, this is the memory ETF. So yeah. That is most likely going to be it for me today. Let me kind of go over my game plan once again, and then I'm going to get ready for market open. Some buyers are actually stepping in nicely here. So key levels on the Qs coming to market open, as I mentioned. Previous day lows, along with our 709. Currently, we're breaking back above. Let's see if we can get that push back up in towards our pre-market highs. So our previous day highs coming to market open. For SPY, key level 744 today, along with that 740. Main watch is coming to market open. Let's keep an eye out on Nvidia above our previous day highs. That's going to be key. AMD, the reclaim back above our previous day lows. I do like a couple of these ones, more for some swing setups, but keep an eye out on a lot of these ones after pulling back last week. There's going to be a lot of nice opportunities presenting themselves. So like AMD, higher low here on the daily for continuation back towards all-time highs. Nvidia, similar thing. Apple still looks fairly solid above our 301. Some of my favorite names are going to be MU, right? MU back above our previous day highs for a pushback towards the upside. Intel, this one, similar thing here as well, back above our previous day highs for a pushback towards the upside. So main names are going to be some of the semis, MU, Intel, and then of course we have AMD and Nvidia here as well. Other names you can keep an eye out on is Google. Looks good here on the daily chart. We'd like to see the break back above that previous day highs. And then Tesla, a little bit weaker, but still building up higher lows here on the daily. We'd like to see that reclaim back above our previous day lows if you want to see any sort of push back towards the upside. But yeah, that is going to be it for me today. I'm going to get ready for market open here now. Hopefully you guys did enjoy it. If you did, appreciate if you guys drop a like and sub. And yeah, I'm gonna get ready for market open here now, and I will see you guys all tomorrow. All right, take care, everyone. Have a great rest of the day. Peace.